Right now, across kitchen tables in every corner of this nation, millions of Americans are asking themselves a profoundly simple question. Is there really money coming, or is this just another false promise? Let me tell you something I've learned over decades of watching how government programs actually work versus how they're marketed to us. The truth about these $2,000 payment letters being discussed isn't what most people think, and understanding the distinction could mean the difference between hope and disappointment. See, when you hear about stimulus payments, dividend distributions, or special supplements tied to Social Security, SSDI, or SSI, there's always a critical detail hiding in plain sight. The government doesn't send money without a specific legislative trigger. They need Congress to pass something, the President to sign it, and the Treasury to execute it. What we're seeing right now is a conversation about several different payment streams that people are lumping together, and that's creating confusion. Some folks are waiting on legitimate benefit adjustments. Others are hearing about state-level programs. And yes, there are federal discussions happening, but the devil lives in the details. The question isn't whether you'll get $2,000, it's which program you actually qualify for, what the timeline really looks like, and most importantly, what action you need to take versus what happens automatically. Let me walk you through what's actually happening here, because the financial media and social media have created a fog so thick that even well-informed people are getting lost in it. I've spent my life studying how information travels through systems, and I can tell you that right now we're witnessing a textbook case of what happens when partial truths meet desperate hope and then get amplified through the echo chamber of the internet. The result is millions of people believing things that aren't quite accurate, waiting for payments that might not come the way they expect, and worst of all, missing out on benefits they actually do qualify for because they're focused on the wrong information. The first thing you need to understand is that there isn't one single $2,000 payment program. What we're dealing with is actually several different conversations happening simultaneously, and people are blending them together into one narrative. There's talk about potential federal stimulus payments, which would require new legislation. There are discussions about Social Security benefit adjustments and cost of living increases, which follow a completely different mechanism. There are state-level programs in places like California, New York, and a handful of other states that have their own relief payments for low-income residents. And then there are the regular ongoing payments that millions of Americans receive every month through Social Security, SSDI, and SSI that some people are confusing with new or additional money. When you mix all of these together without understanding the distinctions, you end up with confusion and misinformation. Now let's talk about Social Security specifically, because this is where a lot of the confusion originates. Every year, Social Security benefits are adjusted based on something called the cost of living adjustment, or COLA. This isn't a bonus or a stimulus, it's an inflation adjustment designed to help your benefits keep pace with the rising cost of goods and services. For 2025, that adjustment was announced, and it represents a percentage increase applied to your existing benefit amount. If you're receiving, say, $1,500 a month in Social Security retirement benefits, and the COLA is 3%, you're not getting 3% as a separate payment. You're getting 3% added to your monthly benefit, which would bring you to roughly $1,545 per month. Over the course of a year, that adds up, but it's not a lump sum check for $2,000 arriving in your mailbox. This is a critical distinction that many people are missing. The letters that some people have been receiving or hearing about are typically notifications from the Social Security Administration about these benefit adjustments, or in some cases, they're notifications about back payments owed due to processing delays or eligibility determinations that were finally resolved. The Social Security Administration is a massive bureaucracy processing millions of claims, and sometimes there are delays. When those delays get resolved, people receive lump sum payments for the months they should have been receiving benefits, but weren't. If you filed for disability benefits and it took the government 8 months to approve your claim, you might receive a back payment covering those 8 months, and depending on your monthly benefit amount, that could certainly add up to $2,000 or more. But this isn't a new stimulus program. It's the government catching up on payments they already owed you. Then there's the SSDI and SSI side of things, which operates under similar principles but with some important differences. SSDI, or Social Security Disability Insurance, is for people who paid into the Social Security system through their work history and then became disabled. SSI, or Supplemental Security Income, is a needs-based program for people with very limited income and resources who are elderly, blind, or disabled. Both programs receive the same COLA adjustments as regular Social Security retirement benefits, but the SSI program has additional considerations because it's means tested. If your income or assets change, your SSI payment can go up or down. Some people receiving SSI might see their payments adjusted not because of a new stimulus program, but because their circumstances changed and the Social Security Administration finally processed that change. Again, this can result in lump sum payments if there were back payments owed, but it's not the same as Congress passing a new relief bill. What about actual stimulus payments, though? Because those have happened before and people remember them. During the pandemic, the federal government sent out 3 rounds of economic impact payments, $1,200 in the first round, $600 in the second, and $1,400 in the third. Those were direct stimulus payments based on your income level and tax filing status, and they were separate from Social Security, SSDI, or SSI benefits. People who received Social Security also received those stimulus payments if they qualified based on income thresholds. The reason those payments happened is because Congress passed specific legislation authorizing them, the President signed those bills into law, and the Treasury Department executed the payments. As of right now, in early 2025, there is no such legislation that has been passed and signed into law authorizing a new round of stimulus payments. There are proposals floating around, there are politicians talking about it, there are advocacy groups pushing for it, but talk and proposals are not the same as actual law. This is where understanding the legislative process becomes crucial. For a new stimulus payment to happen, a bill would need to be introduced in either the House of Representatives or the Senate. That bill would need to go through committee hearings, it would need to be debated, amended, and then voted on by the full chamber. If it passes one chamber, it goes to the other chamber and goes through the same process there. If both chambers pass different versions, those differences need to be reconciled. Then the final version goes to the President's desk for signature. This entire process takes time, and it's subject to political negotiations, budget concerns, and competing priorities. Even when there's broad agreement that something should be done, the details of how to do it can bog down legislation for months. Right now, there's discussion about various relief measures, but nothing has made it through this entire process to become law. What complicates matters even further is that some states have implemented their own relief programs. California, for instance, has sent out several rounds of Golden State stimulus payments and middle-class tax refunds to eligible residents. These are state-funded programs, not federal programs, and they have their own eligibility criteria based on state income tax returns and residency requirements. If you live in California and receive one of these payments, and you also receive Social Security, you might think the payment came from the Social Security Administration, but it actually came from the California Franchise Tax Board. Other states have similar programs with different names and different eligibility rules. New York has had relief programs, Colorado has had programs, even some smaller states have implemented targeted relief for their residents. The amount of these state payments varies widely. Some are a few $100s, some are over $1,000, and in rare cases involving back payments or specific circumstances, they could reach or exceed $2,000. But again, these are state programs, not federal Social Security or stimulus programs. Now let me talk about something that doesn't get discussed enough in these conversations, and that's the role of third-party organizations and how they sometimes create confusion. There are advocacy groups out there doing important work pushing for better benefits for seniors and people with disabilities. These groups often circulate petitions, send out emails, and post on social media about proposed legislation or benefit improvements they're fighting for. Sometimes, in an effort to mobilize support or inform their members, these communications can be worded in ways that make proposals sound more certain than they actually are. You might see a headline that says, $2,000 payments approved for Social Security recipients, when what actually happened is that a proposal for such payments was approved by a committee, or introduced as a bill, or endorsed by a particular advocacy group, but not yet passed into law. The organization isn't necessarily trying to mislead anyone. They're trying to build momentum for their cause. But the end result is that people start believing the payments are coming when they're actually still in the proposal stage. There's also the phenomenon of viral misinformation on social media platforms. Someone creates a video or a post claiming that checks are going out next week, and it gets shared thousands of times because people want to believe it's true. They're not checking the source. They're not verifying the information. They're just sharing it because it's hopeful news. Then other people see those shares and assume they must be true because so many people are talking about it. Before you know it, you've got millions of people convinced that payments are imminent when there's actually no official announcement, no legislation passed, and no money authorized. This is how modern misinformation spreads, and it's particularly harmful to vulnerable populations like seniors and people on fixed incomes who are desperately hoping for financial relief. So what should you actually be watching for if you want accurate information? First, any real stimulus payment or new benefit program will be announced through official government channels. The Social Security Administration has an official website at SSI.gov, and they publish all legitimate updates there. The Internal Revenue Service, which typically handles the distribution of stimulus payments, has IRS.gov, and they post official information there. These websites might not be the flashiest sources of information, and they might not use clickbait headlines, but they're authoritative. If something major has been passed into law, it will be reported by mainstream news organizations, not just social media accounts or YouTube channels trying to get views. I'm not saying those alternative sources are always wrong, but you need to verify what they're saying against official sources before you make plans based on that information. Second, understand the timeline of how government payments actually work. Even when legislation is passed, it takes time to implement. The stimulus payments during the pandemic didn't go out the day the bills were signed. There was a lag time while the Treasury Department and the IRS set up the systems to distribute the money, determine eligibility, and process millions of payments. If a new stimulus bill were signed today, you'd likely be looking at several weeks, possibly months, before payments actually started going out. The government doesn't move quickly, and that's frustrating, but it's the reality. Anyone telling you that payments are going out next Tuesday when legislation hasn't even been passed yet is either misinformed or deliberately misleading you. Third, be skeptical of anything that requires you to take action to claim a benefit that you're supposedly automatically entitled to. Real Social Security benefits and real federal stimulus payments don't require you to click on a link, fill out a form on some random website, or pay a processing fee. If someone is telling you that you need to do those things to get your $2,000 payment, you're likely looking at a scam. The Social Security Administration already has your information if you're receiving benefits. The IRS has your information from your tax returns or from the Social Security Administration. They don't need you to verify your bank account through some third-party website. Scammers know that people are waiting for payments, and they exploit that hope by creating fake websites and sending phishing emails designed to steal your personal information or money. What you should actually be doing right now is making sure that your existing benefits are optimized and that you're not missing out on programs you actually do qualify for. There are legitimate programs that millions of Americans don't take advantage of simply because they don't know about them. The Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, provides food assistance to low-income individuals and families. Many seniors who would qualify for SNAP benefits don't apply because they think it's only for younger people or families with children, but that's not true. If you're living on a limited Social Security income, you might qualify. Similarly, there are programs to help with Medicare premiums, prescription drug costs, and utility bills. These programs exist, they're funded, and they're available right now. not in some hypothetical future after a bill gets passed, but today. Yet millions of eligible people aren't enrolled because they don't know the programs exist or they think the application process is too complicated. I want to circle back to something fundamental about how to think about financial news and benefits information. When you hear something that sounds too good to be true, your first instinct should be to verify it, not to celebrate it. I understand that when you're living on a fixed income, and every month is a struggle to make ends meet, the idea of a $2,000 payment is incredibly appealing. That hope is understandable and valid, but hope shouldn't cloud your judgment about what's real and what's speculation. The way to protect yourself is to go directly to official sources, to be patient about verification, and to remember that legitimate government programs don't require you to act immediately or risk losing out. Real benefits will still be there tomorrow and next week after you've had time to verify the information.